Welcome back to my video channel. This is part 3 of a 4-part series. All right, so in the first 2 parts we covered God's reach and we covered God's power. I really hope you're listening. I really hope you're listening. This is eternally serious. So now this brings me to viral videos, 2 viral videos rather, that I've seen. And I applaud both gentlemen. I agree with what they're saying. There's a mathematician, I don't know his name. You can easily find him on YouTube. I think it's the F around and find out video. And then there's another gentleman that draws another graph that I think is equally accurate. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in a minute. So he used a simple XY graph. On the x-axis is F around, and you know what F around means: screw around, goof around, mess around. And on the y-axis is find out. And then the mathematician drew a 45-degree angle line. And if you know anything about graphs, if you plot a point here, then in order to hit this graph, which is the description of what actually takes place, then you point another point right here. So if you F around to this degree right here, and you go up to this graph, you're going to come over here and you're going to find out a little bit. And as you can see, the more you F around, you go up on the graph, you come over this way, the more you're going to find out. And I've been around for 66 years, and I know that this graph is true. It's just, sorry, it's the way it is. And if you look out here, if you really F around, you're really going to find out. And these places are people that wind up in prison and wind up in committing suicide and wind up severely addicted to drugs and things like that. It's just seems to be a law of the universe, and since God's the one that created the universe, this is his law. Now, the other gentleman drew a graph which I find very interesting, and he said that, let me draw the graph here real quick. And he said that the graph looks more like this, and I agree with both gentlemen. I would say that this one, in my experience, is probably a little closer to the truth, but I'm not positive. They both are very truthful videos. So this one shows that I can F around, and I'm not going to find out a whole lot, because on this it's really low, and I get to keep on doing that. So that's like people like speeding and not getting traffic tickets, or gossiping and not having blowback, or eating really poorly and not having any physical manifestations. But if you notice, the effing around gets to a certain point and then it goes exponential, and that's where I speed, and then I do get the tickets, and then I keep on getting the tickets, or I keep on eating my way, the junk food and stuff like that, and then I get type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, and or I start getting irritable bowel syndrome, or all sorts of horrible things. Or I drink and I drink and I drink, or I smoke weed or whatever, and I get away with it for a while, and then eventually it takes off and it hits the exponential curve, and then I become a hope to die alcoholic or a drug addict, and maybe the weed leads to cocaine or psychedelics or whatever. Um, this is very true. This is very true. I think it goes up exponentially in from what I've observed in my lifetime and what I've experienced in my lifetime. And so now we're going to apply this to God. So as we talked about the choices where they're going to F around and find out. Well, it's infinitely more grave in effing around with God. Now, I believe that this curve right here is more the curve of God, where he offers a tremendous amount of grace. He understands that people have situations, they grow up in households where it's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's terrible. And I think God allows for those circumstances, and he allows for effing around with respect to that. But there comes a point where, in my experience and in my observation of life, where God stops allowing the finding out to be minimal in comparison to the effing around. And once it hits that point, then an individual winds up in something like Alcoholics Anonymous, or Marijuana Anonymous, or Sex Anonymous, or Overeaters Anonymous, or they wind up in jail, or they wind up in prison, or they wind up in asylums, or they wind up in the morgue. And I hate to tell you guys this, but once I end up in the morgue, my chances to F around anymore are over. And there's just finding out for eternity. Am I painting the picture clear enough for you? My kudos to the gentleman that created those two videos. The mathematician with the 45-degree angle, and the other gentleman that created the exponential curve. I think they both have tremendous merit. And with regard to eternity, I would take it very seriously. F around and find out. And you'll find out for eternity. So you've been warned.